Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret Raccoon podcast, episode 219. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of June 2023. And the first thing I need to say before we start this episode is Happy Pride Month to everyone who is celebrating it or a part of the LGBTQ plus community. It is a wonderful month for a lot of reasons because we are giving respect, and that is one of the most important things about said month. We're giving respect to those of you who are in a group that is unfortunately not in the best position or regarded by certain behind the times people in society, unfortunately. But happy Pride Month once again. Hopefully you guys enjoy said celebration and your time if you do fall into said category. But the first thing I want to talk about, or the first few things I want to talk about, is some of the things that I actually did over the last 2 weeks. Over here in England, it's surprisingly been quite warm. I'm actually kind of sitting in the sunlight right now, which is a rare sight because most people know England, London for being a very miserable, rainy country, and it is, once again, very odd to see sunlight and actual heat being, hitting the country, so to speak. One of the first things I watched, or more accurately finished, was season 15 of Taskmaster, which is one of my favorite comedy game show things that exists right now. For those of you who don't know what necessarily the show is, it is essentially a, like I said, comedy game show challenge thing where 5 comedians essentially complete certain challenges to effectively win said show. And season 15 was, I think, maybe one of my favorite seasons in recent years, mainly because of the contestants and the kind of banter they had with each other. This season does feature the 5, let's say, as they refer to them as funny people, legendary comedian Frankie Boyle, Ivo Graham, Jenny Eclair, Kyle Smith-Bino, and Mae Martin, who a very interesting cast of people when you look at kinds of the things they've done. Jenny Eclair is someone who should be synonymous with British comedy and British culture for the most part. Kyle Smith-Bino, he is sort of more of an actor, more of a comedic actor. He is currently in the BBC series Ghosts. That's where most people probably would know him or will know him from. And Mae Martin was one of the first people who I wasn't super familiar with. They are a Canadian, so to speak, comedian. I think they do reside in England, and I did correct myself really quickly there because they are the first non-binary comedian to appear on Taskmaster, which is pretty awesome and very relevant for this month. Just a weird coincidence that kind of aligned with said episode and I guess some of the things we're going to be talking about. But this season, in my opinion, was fantastic. I think they really kind of mastered, to some extent, kind of like blend of everything that kind of made the series great with really devious and very questionable challenges throughout the series that really had the contestants actually arguing a lot, like questioning the legitimacy of certain contestants actually being, viable to get the full 5 points or to win the task, so to speak. One such example is in an earlier episode where they have a challenge where they have to take a ball and they have to make it hit as many cymbals on a drum kit as they can. And one contestant, I'm not going to spoil it, one contestant comes up with a way to continuously have this ball move and hit as many cymbals as they can, and it caused an almost 5-minute argument with everyone else saying that what they did was, not correct, going into physics and the legitimacy of language and all that kind of stuff, which is something that really did come up a lot, is people kind of skirting or kind of interpreting the tasks in ways that upset more than others, which was pretty great. But a lot of tasks were really good. Some standout ones I really enjoyed were ones where, if I remember correctly, it was a team task where they were handcuffed and they had to eat bad tasting jelly beans, They had to figure out what flavors they were and align the first letter of both 2 flavors to an element's number on a chemistry periodic table in order to figure out what the code was to unhandcuff themselves. So it had some really funny, ingenious stuff. So just really dumb stuff. For example, like they just have a bunch of pineapples floating in the water and they have to get as many pineapples from the little river back onto land, and they can't touch the water, obviously. Really great stuff. Even talking with water, they even had a, I'm forgetting the name of the thing. It's a thing that people ride on the river. It's not a canoe. I can't remember. They were driving some kind of boat vehicle across the river, which was pretty interesting to see a British TV entrust 5 comedians with steering and driving, this kind of thing. But I would highly recommend this series. Any series is good for you to start watching. And one of the best things about the Taskmaster series is you can, in theory, watch all the episodes on YouTube for free. Yeah, they actually upload them all, and as far as I'm aware, almost every country can watch them. So it's not going to be a hassle. If you want to watch and binge watch a show, if you want to see something that kind of explores British culture, British comedy, or if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, highly recommend this series. Lots of stuff. You're bound to find someone or something that you enjoy within that series. The next thing I watched and enjoyed, which I had to kind of watch and get out the way for fear of not necessarily missing out, but because the kind of landscape of culture, especially how people, I guess, spread information, I say that as a nasty thing, kind of consume and talk about said media, people are very quick to spoil things. They are unfortunately under the assumption that because I've seen this film, everyone else has seen this film, I really like this film, therefore I got to talk about the things I liked in this film, and spoilers happen. It happened with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, where someone uploaded a scene, which I unfortunately saw the screenshot of. Luckily, I managed to beat them. But obviously, enough stalling. The film I did watch was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I saw it, I think, the second day it came out, and my thoughts, I thought it was near perfect, going on fantastic. There are a lot of really great elements in this film that really elevate this to being one of the better and stronger films released this year, not just with animated films. Of course, the animation style and the use of animation variations, given what this film is going into, and I'm sure most of you know, with the concept of the original first film and this film, it kind of blending different worlds, different spider characters, heroes, people, men, women, things into one world, and kind of like their universe being unstable and other elements of that. How they handled that was really well. It did get a bit too reference heavy at some point, and some of those reference and jokes didn't quite hit as hard as I think they wanted to. Yes, there were some funny stuff, but within the audience I was with, which I'm going to get to in a minute, yeah, it was very much like, haha, I remember that. I think the film really excels in storytelling, dialogue writing. I think the characters are all fantastic. I can't quite say what my biggest gripe with this film is, because I consider it a spoiler, and I do not want to spoil this film for anyone. I'm not that kind of person. My biggest negative, I will say, is it rubbed me the wrong way, and it's something I don't like seeing in films, and I'm not happy to see it appear in this film and possibly resurface in other films. I will talk about it, let's say, later on in the year, because it's not even something that, has destroyed the film for me. I'm giving it a 1 star or whatever. It's just something that I was very disappointed to see in the film. The only other negative I would say is the story gets very messy towards the end. You do get a whole scene, a very long-winded and quite boring scene of characters explaining things, and explaining it quite poorly. And if you know anything about, once again, without spoiling anything, let's just say multiverse, you'll know that a problem the film presents has a very easy and very simple solution that the film kind of presents as the biggest problem in the world, when realistically it's not. And I just don't really know. Well, actually, I do know why they went about doing things like this, but I can't say why because a spoiler. But do not let my negatives deter me from, or deter you from watching this film. I think it's a really good film. If you love the first film, you will love this film, simply put. The only other thing that I can, let's say, warn people away from this film is if you have very sensitive vision, you wear glasses or flashing images, different changes in styles and other kinds of things, lighting, whatever, be very cautious with this film. There are a lot of blends of different animation styles, different frame rate movements. Not necessarily there's going to be flashing images, but the way some things are presented, they can be considered quite blinding and quite full on, especially if you're watching them in a dark lit cinema. So I would say if you know that you are sensitive to that, or if you did not like the fact that the first film, and I presume this film, both moved in 30 frames and 60 frames, and this film possibly could be moving in various different frame rates depending on the character and where they're from, please be careful when you watch this film. You may not have the best of times, and I know that's a comment or a criticism a lot of people have brought up. So just a fair warning in case you feel like that's something that is going to be a problem for you for the most part. But I'll say really quick, because I kind of have rambled on a lot about the things I've watched, which is fair dues. That's kind of what most of the podcast is about. I did not have the best cinema experience watching this film. It did not necessarily make the film a bad experience for me, but I did write down some of the things that did bother me, which I'm going to recall real quick in a rough kind of order. So people kept pulling their phones out. One person in particular did pull their phone out a couple of times. Now, I'm going to give this person a slight bit of credit, because coming out of the cinema, I saw that they met up with their grandparents. It was clearly a case of they had gone to go watch a film, grandparents had gone shopping, grandparents were checking on them, he was checking on them. He was doing the right thing, so I'm going to give him a pass. People kept getting up. I counted at least 7 people getting up and walking past the screen. There was a man behind me who kept coughing in my ear, which was incredibly frustrating. There was constant packaging noises, like literally as soon as the title card for the film, where it says like the confirmation of, its rating and all that, literally popcorn and packets were being opened. Another kid asked me a question after the film, and I, once again, can't say what that question was because it blends into something I can't say. And then a kid started dancing and doing Fortnite dances to one of the songs playing over the end credits. Granted, the song was a banger, but even still, not what I wanted to see. But anyway, let's actually move on to the very few trailers we have to talk about on this episode. And the other thing I need to address real quick is, yes, the Summer Games Fest has happened. And I'm not talking about any of the trailers on this episode because information keeps coming up, and at the time of me writing this episode and me recording it, people are still having their showcases and events. So there is literally no point in me only talking about a fraction of the stuff now when I could talk about everything I want to talk about on the next podcast. So we've just got 4 trailers, 2 gaming-ish and 2 films. And the first one we want to talk about is going to be on Silent Hill Ascension, one of the many games that Konami decided to announce regarding Silent Hill, because Silent Hill is making a comeback. Yay, because Konami has treated the Silent Hill franchise with such respect over the last 15 years. But let's get this one out the way, because I'm literally I've just lost faith in this franchise and everything that happens. Like, this is one of the 3 Silent Hill games believed to be releasing this year, which is a problematic issue in of itself, because this is oversaturation. Even if the release date for these games are a year apart, as I'm apparently also hearing that god-awful Silent Hill 2 remake is apparently coming out next year. Even if they're this far apart, you're not exactly making them special. Like, it's just too much. Like, I don't really want to be playing Silent Hill game after Silent Hill game after Silent Hill game, and I'm pretty sure most people don't. People want, some level of consistency, but not at the level of Ubisoft, because look how well that's turned out. And I mean, making something as special as Silent Hill a continuous series is a troubling sign. This kind of a Silent Hill for everyone mentality is just plain wrong in my opinion. I think that applies to almost any franchise that has any merit or worth to it, because you can't cater to and please everyone, especially in such a niche genre like horror. Like, fun fact, not everyone likes horror games or horror films. That's just how it is. That genre has always had an audience, but it has always been a small audience. Like, have a look at some of the most successful horror films of all time. None of them are in the top 10 highest grossing films of all time. That's a fact. It is a niche. Not everyone is into it, especially with games. Some people prefer jump scare games. Some people prefer games like Silent Hill or Resident Evil. People can pick and choose, and when you see this game and all these other Silent Hill games kind of trying to be everything within gaming, or everything that is encompassing within, let's say, survival horror games, it is very concerning at the end of the day. And I mean, on a quick note, these Silent Hill games have a lot to live up to. They are going up against the Dead Space remake, the Resident Evil 4 remake, Amnesia the Bunker, a game that has just released and people are absolutely loving because it is simply a survival horror game that people, well, more accurately, it's scratching an itch that people really want. You know, Dead Space and Resident Evil 4, they're very much action horror. This is survival horror at the end of the day. And I mean, and also, and as well, one of the scariest games released this year, of course, being Redfall. But people aren't going to connect with the Silent Hill 2 remake like they do with the original. Blooper Team and Konami's hearts aren't in it. Like, unlike Capcom, they're not releasing these games and remakes for the love of the series, but because something has clearly gone wrong at like Konami HQ. I don't know what's going on, why they just feel the need to remake everything. I mean, people have said like, oh, they've just randomly realized they used to make games and they're trying to, you know, not necessarily erase their past, their awful past of just basically telling everyone to F off, but it comes across as very transparent and very greedy at the end of the day that you are only going to remake Metal Gear Solid 3 because you think that's the popular one and the best one. You're only going to remake Silent Hill 2 because that's the one everyone loves. Not do a remake of Silent Hill 1, a game that, you know, graphically doesn't look as great as other entries. You know, it's, once again, very transparent. And this game, which I'm going to get to, comes across as very transparent. Like, I know this is a cinematic trailer I'm talking about for Silent Hill Ascension, but damn, like, there's just so many cutscenes in this trailer and they're so boring. Like, just let people play the game. Like, tell the story through actual gameplay, which is what most, or at least good games, should do at the end of the day. Like, I'll be honest, this game looks ugly. In an industry where representation and recognition is everything, especially with AAA games, and we have seen a lot of AAA games that look ugly, funny enough, not do well critically and financially, you can't have poor graphics like this. Yes, graphics aren't everything, and I would give it a pass if it was an indie game, like, you know, someone's first attempt at doing a, let's say, Silent Hill type game. But at the end of the day, you know, when you hear the name Silent Hill, you expect quality, you know, in reference to the first 4 Silent Hill games, and this doesn't look like quality. This looks like something that was made or started in production a year ago, cutscene-wise, or gameplay-wise, or whatever the hell they're proclaiming with this rubbish, so to speak. Konami has clearly hired some random studio to make a game and just slap the Silent Hill logo on it. Nothing about this has core elements of Silent Hill, at least looking at the gameplay trailer, because yes, although the Silent Hill games had story, they weren't melodramatic, boring garbage like this game is trying to do about, oh, I'm struggling with this and that, and the sadness and the feels is what this game comes across as. That's not what Silent Hill was all about. Silent Hill was complex in comparison to what they're presenting here at the end of the day. And I mean, the monster designs are limp, like it's a monster with a hole in its face, a flesh slit hole in its face that opens. Like, I wonder what that's supposed to represent. You know, it's too on the nose with no subtlety. It's so basic. Like, you could look up any horror game released in the last 5 years and I guarantee you'll see a monster design exactly like that. There's nothing scary about that. It's boring, it's been done to death, and what you're trying to present in a sort of, it's a metaphor for something this person's scared of, it's done. It's rubbish. You're not doing anything. You're not saying anything at the end of the day. And like, they seem to think, whether it being Konami or the studio making this, they seem to think that Silent Hill is just the Conjuring series, that's not the case. And this game, this is where it gets really interesting. This game is apparently an interactive streaming service where millions of players impact Silent Hill canon forever. Like, who the hell was asking for this? Like, I'll tell you who. Not Silent Hill fans, not anyone with taste or a brain. Like, I really don't understand where this idea is coming from. The whole idea of it being like some online narrative feature thing. I don't get it. Like, it's just bizarre. As media and money has proven, people like a simple story. They like to be able to follow a story that has a start, middle, and end. When you're presenting people with a game that has multiple starts, multiple middles, and multiple ends, who wants that? Because at the end of the day, most people are just going to look up all the endings on YouTube, and that video will probably garner more money and attention than your fucking game at the end of the day. And I mean, what a confusing, dumb idea. Like, I've heard of like trying to experiment, but then sometimes, I'm honestly just really just baffled by this direction that Konami has taken to try and differentiate themselves with something so stupid. Like, this just reconfirms that the series ended with Silent Hill 4 at the end of the day. Let's move on to another trailer. Well, actually, no, it's not even a trailer. It's more of a news story, but I thought was quite interesting and quite relevant for the podcast and some of the things we're going to talk about. And that is going to be Catbat, who is a character in the up-and-coming Crash Bandicoot Rumble game, is the first non-binary character to join the Crash Bandicoot series, which is pretty interesting for a myriad of reasons. Now, none of my negatives that I'm going to display are aimed at Toys for Bob. I am strictly pointing at Activision Blizzard for what I'm about to say. Now, the reason why this simple fact has been brought up to the degree is because it's a distraction tactic to paint Activision in a good light after doing some awful things. They always do this. When those horrible allegations about Activision Blizzard came out about misconduct and breast milk being stolen, and yes, unfortunately there were reports that people were having their breast milk stolen for some reason, I guess because people could. They released an announcement trailer for Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 to essentially quell all the commentary, let's just say, that the company was getting. Trailers that they were clearly sitting on and only uploaded them as a form of damage control. And they're doing the same thing here, as a few weeks ago they cancelled the PvE, which is player versus environment, which essentially means that you will do certain things to essentially upgrade said characters, which you then take on into online and that kind of stuff. They cancelled it in Overwatch 2, effectively killing the game. So days later, I believe on the 30th or the 31st of May, they confirmed that the characters Farah and Baswitz, I'm not sure, I don't know what any of the characters in Overwatch 2 are. Basically, they confirmed that 2 characters from the game are bisexual, just in time for Pride Month, mind you. And because people were still pissed at them for essentially taking advantage, well, not necessarily taking advantage, excuse me, I've kind of lost my train of thought. People are still pissed at the company because of like their more recent shady practices with Diablo 4, with Horse Armor DLC, excuse me. They've released this information in hopes of distracting anyone and everyone, by taking advantage of the month once again, unfortunately. Like, I'm pretty sure this was a factor in information that was confirmed about the character or was something that the creators wanted to do. And I think just someone higher up at Blizzard Activision was just like, yeah, no, really, just talk about this. We need people to think we're a good company now. And I mean, you know, I'm sure the higher-ups' logic was, see, we can't be a greedy company if there are non-binary characters in our game. Trust me, we're not full of shit. If this isn't going to play into the story or their character, why make a big song and dance about it? Like, it feels like representation for the sake of representation, and that just feels dishonest at the end of the day. A character should be or have a design that references, let's say, their gender or their, sexual orientation. It should feel natural. It should be something that is not their character. It should be a small detail that is the character itself. And I mean, yes, more non-binary representation is great, but given the things I've previously mentioned, it just feels wrong at the end of the day. And I don't really like the way they've gone about doing this and presenting it. It's, it doesn't paint them in a pretty good position, and it kind of makes things more difficult for other people who would like representation at the end of the day. But regardless, I love their David Bowie inspired design. Their original story mini comic is a lot of fun, drawn pretty beautifully as well. But most importantly, they kind of fit into the Crash universe really well. They look like a character that belongs in this world, which I'm more than happy about. But I just thought I'd mention that real quick because it kind of links into another trailer I'm about to talk about, which is going to be for the film Bottoms. Like, what the hell is this film? Like, it goes from a teen drama rom-com throwback to Fight Club but with spiteful girls. And like, as I'm sure some of you are probably picking up on, yeah, this is a very misleading title, and it doesn't even make sense as like a double meaning. No one refers to the unpopular kids as bottoms. Their bullies just call them nasty names regardless of their sexual preference. Also, the timing, once again, is a little exploitative of the month, especially if LGBTQ plus themes in this film are so minimal. I think it is alluded to the fact that the two main characters may be gay in this film, but the crux of the film, I'd imagine, is them trying to impress other people who are the opposite gender of them to go out with them, and there's like a dumbass who's getting in the way. You know, calling it bottoms just is, you know, once again, just very weird. And I mean, I thought this was going to be about a gay couple in school dealing with oppressive homophobic bullies, excuse me. You know, that's a way more interesting film, and a massive missed opportunity to not make the film be about that, because that is unfortunately something that a lot of people can connect to, relate to, and sympathize with. Lots of people, especially younger people, who have the, you know, amazing confidence to, you know, state themselves as being gay, bisexual, non-binary, trans. You know, I give these people massive props for doing something like that, but it's unfortunately met with so much negativity from their colleagues and peers, especially in the school setting. That's a film, you know, that would work if done well, of course. So this just kind of feels like, once again, very exploitative. The tone is all over the place. Like, it goes from like realistic comedy to a guy hitting a girl so hard that he sends her flying like 8 feet across a hall like it's an anime battle. Like, is this like a daydream scene? Is this like trying to be like some kind of meta commentary on how strong men are in comparison to women who are being portrayed as very weak in this film, which is why the girls need to have the Fight Club to stand up for themselves? Messages are getting very mixed up here, how I'm reading them, and hopefully I'm reading them incorrectly, because I would hate for a film to be saying what I have just suggested. But I mean, the quirky dialogue is fine. It can work in a hyper-realistic world, but it does border on being extremely questionable and not the good kind, especially what the teachers are saying to students. Like, it's very, very inappropriate what they're saying. Like, it could also be considered abuse given the tone and the way they are talking to them about that. And you can make this joke in a far better way, that's more like comedic, that has more comedic questioning for the audience members that do get the joke or the thing that they are alluding to, for the most part, as opposed to what this film is doing, which is just kind of being explicit for the sake of being explicit, which is never really funny. Like, you can go and say the most extreme, awful, disgusting, disturbing things you want, and sure, some people may laugh, but 99% of everyone else who lives in the real world isn't going to. And I mean, a quick example would be just, let's say that there's that very awful scene towards the end of the trailer where the teacher, I'm not even going to repeat it, but he says something very derogative and very concerning towards the characters, which they do say, I don't think you should be saying that to us, which once again just goes back to the whole problematic writing and dialogue of the film. You could simply just have the teacher saying, so, are you two, like, into each other? Because you look like a couple who would, etc., etc. That kind of joke with the girls obviously cutting him off and, oh, it was just a misunderstanding, I didn't mean to do this, and, oh, I'm referencing the fact that you two might be gay, that can work. It can. But I don't think this film has taken the opportunity to try and make a joke or a situation like that work, unfortunately. But also this film looks really cheap. I think it's the odd or the wrong way the film has been lit. Sorry for the awkward cut. The doorbell went off and I had to go and get the door. Obviously, I had a package, just poor timing and bad luck on my behalf. My apologies once again. But we essentially have the last trailer we're going to talk about, and that is going to be for Expend4bles, more accurately stated, the Expendables 4. I have no idea why they're calling it Expend4bles. I don't get it. Okay. But essentially, when watching this trailer and looking at this film, I was immediately reminded and kind of came up with the saying, remember when films were fun? Disney doesn't. They're clearly striking while the iron is hot releasing this trailer after Fast X's massive success in the box office and continuing proof that people want dumb, fun films without messages shoved in their face or like kind of like diverse casting bordering on racism like some films we've seen released this year. And I do love the inclusion of ladies in this one. I don't know if there are any like female characters in the third one. I've only watched the first two, I believe. Who have been tastefully added to the team. They're tough ladies with like that perfect blend of being like sexy, ladylike, but they're also competent at the same time. It isn't just like, oh, we're a pretty face or we're just eye candy for the men. Women can look attractive and be awesome and, all that kind of stuff. I think Hollywood and certain powers that be kind of don't want women to look like women, despite them being women. It's a very bizarre thing. If you ever look at Marvel films, you'll probably notice that a lot of the female characters are just increasingly more covered up to the point where they look exactly like the male characters sometimes, just based on how like the, let's say the superhero suit looks. It's not in every single film, but it is bizarre. Like no one's allowed to be sexy, especially women, which is very baffling when they then get, actresses who are considered to be very attractive and then just cover them up. It's an odd situation that people, and myself included, have noticed. But I do kind of like the fact that rapper 50 Cent is joining the crew. I mean, I think he is the only person on the team who has actually been shot. And of course, he fought in Iraq, so he's more than welcome in a situation like this. And by that, I mean, I am, of course, referencing his, I think 2006 game, Blood on the Sand, when he went to a unnamed country in war turmoil to get back his money. So yeah, everyone is having a lot of fun in this film. This film looks fun just in general. The CGI is a bit sketchy, like the boat looks really fake, so hopefully it will look a lot better in the final film. The action, I'd say, is pretty alright for the most part. It seems like they're not trying to go too extreme, a la the Fast and the Furious series with unrealistic stuff that borders on being a superhero film. You see Jason Statham and the other actor, I can't remember his name right now, having a pretty, intense, very simple, almost end of the film, like man on man, like, knife fight, which is just great. It's going to get everyone's testosterone levels like rising and bubbling or whatever. It looks like a lot of fun. I think that's just the bottom line, full stop. This film looks like fun. I hope it's good. I hope it proves once again that, like I said before, people just want dumb, fun films at the end of the day. So yeah, just a quick one. There really isn't much else to say about this. And yeah, that pretty much brings us to the end of the podcast for the most part. We have the video of the episode, which is a video I've been meaning to make the episode for a while, and that is going to be Gassy Gas and Stuff. This is a Adult Swim Small, which is kind of like them getting smaller creators to kind of make little animations of things for them that they themselves, upload to their YouTube channel or air on the actual Adult Swim channel. I can't remember the creator's name right now. I believe her name is Sarah, but I would love to see this series get like a limited, like online series, like a 10 episode thing. It feels very down to earth, very natural. It's not let's be quirky and weird and just have constant jokes. Every character, despite them all being animals, feels very realistic. You've met these people, you've seen these people, and I think that's why I think a lot of people really connected with this animation. I just want to see it get and garner a bigger audience. That's why I'm promoting it as much as I do. I would, once again, love to see it just get like a 10 episode, 10-minute episode. I'm repeating myself. I want to see it get like 10 episodes, each episode being about 5 minutes. I think that'd be perfect. There's a lot of potential here at the end of the day. But yeah, next podcast, episode 220, is going to be the best and worst of 2023 so far. Hopefully I'll get a couple of people on the episode. If not, I will still be going through some of the best and worst things from this year. And there's a lot to go through, unfortunately and fortunately. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you in this episode. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. Really means a lot to me that you decided to listen to it, especially if you listen to it all the way through. Once again, thank you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It'd be nice to kind of build up that audience. But yeah, I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.